We'd like to welcome everybody to today's Finance and Administrative Committee meeting. It must be the new year because y'all hadn't seen each other in a while. A lot of chatter going out there, but Happy New Year to everybody. Are we good to go, Kim? Okay. Today's meeting agenda has been produced well in advance of a motion.
Second.
All in favor? The minutes from our December 19th, 2023 meeting.
Second.
All in favor? Next, we have appearance by citizens. If there's anyone that'd like to speak to the committee today and that has signed up, I would offer that if your comments are related to an agenda item and you want to wait until then, we will have more than enough time for you to speak at that point. So we'll start with those that have signed up. And again, if you would like to wait until the agenda item, we'd encourage you to do so. Anyone signed up, Kim?
Lee Lucier.
Lee Lucier, Hilton Head resident. Good afternoon, and thank you for the time to speak today. My name is Lee Lucier, CEO of the Richardson Group and longtime Hilton Head Island resident. We have raised our 3 kids here in Hilton Head. We love that we call Hilton Head our home. I would like to say first that I respect everyone's opinion in the room. I truly mean this. A passionate, involved community is invaluable, and that we can all agree that Islander housing inventory is a key issue in our community. With this, today is a time for this committee to lead, to drive community efforts, begin a new chapter of housing options, and not all housing will be fixed upon itself. Our company has recently built housing, dorms, apartments, studios, and large-scale multifamily development. And each time we've been met with support and detractors for each project, before and after its completion. Yes, we will continue to pursue this project and any other project that supports our community's inventory and the workforce of our community. The role of local government in particular is to make great decisions and sometimes very tough decisions. Your choice to be active in local government, I assume, was not lightly taken or ill-planned, as this is a commitment for you and your families to serve our community. You have chosen to be a brave leader in your choice of accepting this governmental role. Today is the day to have your courage and conviction shine, leading us to possible housing solutions. Therefore, I'm here to say I'm in full support of the town entering into MOUs with both CCDC and Habitat and funding them to add workforce housing puzzle, a very complex puzzle that will not be solved today, tomorrow, or within this year. The CCD plan is the only proposal that doesn't add any new built space or vertical construction to our island. Not one additional new square foot of under roof construction. Habitat for Humanity is a proven model for home ownership on the island, in the Low Country, and across the United States. These 2 partnership proposals, in conjunction with longer-term partnerships like North Point and private developer initiatives, are all needed to make meaningful change to our workforce housing problem and hopefully solution. I urge you to vote in favor of both MOUs today and recommend funding for both CCDC and Habitat for Humanity as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you.
Paul Kale.
I'm gonna wait.
You
Did he
wanna
wait?
Melinda Tunner. I'll wait. John Casey. Matt Sweeney.
I'll wait.
Dowdan Lee. That's all I have.
Thank you. Any others want to address the committee on any other topic? Yes, sir.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm John Smarsley from Hilton Head Plantation. In October 2022, town staff convened a 2-day housing charrette with the purpose of sharing and refining local housing trends. Test and refine statements that led to a housing framework. This was the result of years concerned needs of our local workforce. Many people who were involved here are here today. Many of these folks championed the November 2022 Workforce Housing Framework. Many council members on this committee agreed that the 4 pillars, community involvement, planning, management, and finding a revenue source, finally gave teeth to solving this long-time issue. As part of involving the community, Town Council created the Housing Action Committee. The defined role of the HAC is to, number 1, advise and recommend to the town various workforce housing strategies for their consideration, adoption, and implementation. Number 2, review all of the town housing plans and potential plans that may be created or adopted to address the town's workforce housing needs, making recommendations and suggestions for implementation. Number 3, assist the town in determining relevant housing policies that will accomplish identified goals and objectives. Knowing that town council and staff truly believe that following these pillars can develop a local meaningful workforce housing plan, knowing that town council added human resources, revenue streams, and prioritized the workforce housing issue, knowing that town council has asked countless citizens to volunteer their time through the Housing Action Committee and various workshops. Why is the Finance Committee usurping the entire process? You're taking up MOUs without allowing these organizations to follow the process you initiated through the Workforce Housing Framework. Ramming grant requests through without following the process shows a lack of governmental transparency and making zero sense. One of these organizations believes income up to $150,000 a year could qualify for rental assistance. Is that the workforce we are talking about? Ask yourself why some of the local lobbyists in this room are attempting to slide these requests through before the Housing Action Committee even gets going. I ask that you deny approval of the MOUs and affiliated agency applications and send them to the Housing Action Committee for review. Let's follow the process council adopted, and let's stop this Island Good Old Boy Network once and for all. Thank you.
Thank you. I saw a few more hands. Yes, ma'am, you're next.
Lynn Pico Bullard. I live in Hilton Head Plantation. Hilton Head Island is a commuter island, whether you like it or not. 15,000 workers come here every morning, and 10,000 also leave here to work elsewhere every AM. The island is 80% built out and can in no way possibly accommodate abodes for 15,000 workers and their families. Population growth is minuscule. So what's the goal here? A political talking point of providing 13 homes for 99 years on the rental market, all the while spending $600,000 as an initial investment to have this political token bone, in my opinion, thrown to us, all the while denying workers who can actually afford to buy these 13 homes the opportunity to do so. I view this as an endeavor of unproven and experimental, which benefits a few while denying the whole home ownership. How feasible and financially responsible is this idea for Hilton Head? There are many costs and outcomes that are unknown, such as oversight and maintenance, including, $500 million commitment of local government costs over the next 99 years. This idea lacks logistics and a common sense application for Hilton Head Island, when Beaufort County has a vast area for all rentals.
Thank you for your comments. Gentleman in the back.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. Charles Conahan, 10 Wexford. I'm a relatively new resident to Hilton Head Island. I've been here for about 3 years, been coming here for about a decade. And I'm starting to get my arms kind of wrapped around what's been going on around here. And I'll just leave with some basic comments on how I see it. I don't think government has any place in picking winners and losers in terms of who's allowed to live here and who isn't allowed to live here. When we start talking about AMI and who qualifies this and who qualifies for that, all I'm seeing is a much expanded and larger government with a bigger footprint. And, you know, as a second generation immigrant, I know how difficult it was to, you know, raise a family, buy a home, and a lot of times we all live together and in a community environment within our own family. And so for the government to step in and start offering money to folks that quite frankly haven't earned it yet, because I certainly earned my way up, and I'm sure there's many other people here that are quite like that. And then when you start, you know, offering people money for various portions of housing, who decides what gets what? You know, is the refrigerator in this place better than the one I got over here? This is a massive administrative burden that, quite frankly, I don't think anybody's prepared to take on. And those are just very minor issues. And having come from the Northeast, I have seen what, quote unquote, affordable housing looks like in a lot of cases. You may have some folks that are working their rear ends off when they're small businesses trying to get out. But then you have somebody else in there who is abusing the system, you know, whether they're dealing drugs, whether there's a crime element in there, which is also going to result in an increased requirement for police presence. You know, I just don't see this as being going in the right direction. Most of the businesses here are based upon, you know, rental properties. You've got hotels and so forth. These are transient type jobs. Okay, nobody ever expected somebody who, say, might work as a bartender or cleaning tables is to be able to afford a home. We all had starter jobs, and that's kind of the way it is. So as the woman had just said who came up, you know, a lot of these folks are commuting, and that's kind of the way it is. And I'm certainly, in terms of addressing some of these issues, you know, maybe looking at making it easier for people to make long-term rentals, to make it easier for private individuals to develop housing that folks like that could live in, and let them determine it. But in terms of the government, when you guys are all gone and the next group's gone 4 years after that, you know, who decides how much more is going to go in this may become a very unsustainable revenue stream that it becomes a burden on the local taxpayer. I just would like you to consider that. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
Good afternoon, Ashley Phillips, Indigo Run. Please vote no to the MOU between the town of Hilton Head and the CCDC. I am not against workforce housing. I am against the Finance and Administrative Committee and the Town Council just saying yes to the CCDC because they don't want the appearance of not doing anything. We must remember the CCDC request of $600,000 will not be a one-time ask. They are asking for a yearly contribution. Also, the CCDC is asking for the town to provide support staff, which means more of our tax dollars are being used. There are so many unanswered questions regarding the CCDC proposal. One question is why the discrepancy in the AMI scale? Habitat for Humanity AMI at 30 to 80% and the CCDC AMI is 30 to 120% with only 25% of their units at 30% AMI. How many low-income families does this really help? As I have mentioned several times in the past, I believe the national workforce housing issue cannot be solved with one approach. And we certainly know we cannot build our way out of this housing shortage on the island. I urge you, town council members, business owners, and our community to start working on alternative transportation solutions for workers coming onto and off of the island. Solutions that could start helping right now, not 5 years from now. At the October 17th Town Council meeting, CBB transportation engineers and planners gave a presentation that indicated just widening the bridge was not going to solve our traffic issues. They also said since we already had the trolley system and the breeze system in place, we needed to expand their schedules and stops. Then work with local businesses and advertisers to get the word out and encourage employees, citizens, and visitors to utilize the transportation system, which would reduce the number of vehicles coming onto the island as well as being used around the island. Let's think about this for a minute. Adding a few rental housing units will not solve our low-income housing shortage. Actually, with the CCDC removing the few moderately priced houses that are available on the island, it means less opportunities for middle-income families to buy a home. I will close with this. Just because someone works on the island doesn't mean they want to live on the island or automatically have the right to reside here. Commuting to work is not a new concept. I did it for years, as I'm sure you and most of the people in this room have done as well. Our island is at capacity now. Let's use our tax dollars in a more meaningful and impactful way, and in my opinion, one way would be increasing our public transportation options for workers, visitors, and citizens to navigate around our island. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing none, we will move back to our agenda. Next up, we'll have Mr. Jeff Harriman to give us a very brief financial update, as we just heard from him a few weeks ago.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, Jeff Harriman, Interim Finance Director. And yes, it was just a few weeks ago, and since that time, we've been focused on our FY23 audit, and we do have that completed. So I'm glad to say that the partner with the CPA firm will present that to Town Council on Tuesday. So yes, I'll just briefly go through. Oops. I thought I'd briefly go through. There we go. Sorry. All right. As I said last month, we're at the time of the year when revenue collections are traditionally low. Most of our revenue comes in during the period December through February for property tax, and then March through June for business license. So we are at that period where the revenue is very low. Expenditures are incurred more evenly throughout the throughout the year. Sorry, my thing is a little slow today. Anyway, sorry. As far as the, this is the general fund revenues that transfers in. At this point, we're 5 months into the year, so we're 42% of the way through the year. And you can see if you look at the revenue subtotal, our budget, we've only collected 21% of our budgeted revenue. So, oh, okay, sorry. I was trying to do that there, so, okay, thank you. For some reason, I'm having trouble with the keyboard here. So, anyway, I am going to be, that's all right. How about I'll just make it a little bit more briefer than I was going to make it. So I know the one issues that came up, there were two or three questions that came up at the last meeting. And the one was Councilman Ames, you had asked about the accommodations tax, the local accommodations tax. And the information that we get from all the hotels and property management companies is the gross revenue. We don't get the detail as far as number of tourists and the room rate. However, we will reach out to the DMO and get that information and present that at the next meeting.
Thank you.
Another question that came up last time was on the expenditures, was from Councilman Alfred, and it was about the town council expenditures. And the primary reason for the increase from 23 to 24 is legal fees. Two explanations for that. One, depends on the number of legal lawsuits or legal actions we have going on. And the second thing is the staff attorney position with the town is vacant. And so we have been contracting with two law firms to fill in for that legal work. And that's getting charged to town council legal fees.
Thank you, Mr. Harriman. I'd also like to see the elements of what that is.
Okay. Okay, all right, we'll get that. The other thing I just wanted to mention, and I believe it was Councilman Stanford who talked about that with the investment summary. And I just want to report that at the end of November 30th, we had approximately $200 million invested with the South Carolina Local Government Investment Pool and with Wells Fargo Securities. you can see from that, we had 53.5 million with the local government investment pool. The interest rate in November was almost 5.7%. With Wells Fargo Securities, we have almost 147 million. We have different maturities on those, depending whether it's treasury bills, treasury notes, and the rates on those you can see is 4% to 5.4%. And then on the last slide here, year to date for the first 5 months of the year, we had collected interest income of almost 4.5 million. We're still working on our December financial statements, but we have the interest income through December, and we're actually at 5.5 million through the end of December. The highest we've ever collected in the town before is 5.8 million. So we're having a very strong year on that. So,
Thank you, good job.
all right, thank you. That's all I have to present.
Any other questions from council? No? Thank you, Jeff.
All
Thank
right,
you for
thank
being
you.
attentive to our questions from the last presentation. We will move on to unfinished business. Consideration of approval of a sponsorship agreement with the Heritage Classic Foundation for the RBC Golf Tournament. Mr. Gruber, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. As indicated in the materials that are in your packet for this afternoon, this is a continuing discussion regarding a request that was provided to the town by the Heritage Classic Foundation. They in turn present the RBC Golf Tournament every year. As indicated in the materials, they're requesting an increase in their sponsorship amount from last year to this year, based directly in part on the increased expenses associated with providing a premier and signature event. Today, we do have Mr. Steve Wilmot with the tournament present to answer any questions that the committee may have. Ultimately, coming out of today's meeting, we're seeking direction on answering this question about will the town go forward with the sponsorship agreement, and if so, at what value?
Okay, thank you. Mr. Wilmot, welcome, sir, please.
Thank you, and happy New Year. I'd like to send my regrets from Simon Fraser for not being here. He had a scheduled dentist appointment to get a tooth pulled, so he would rather be here today. But in advance of answering any questions, I would like to truly thank the efforts, the support of this community and this town over the course of many years, and certainly since 2011. And knowing where we are in the designation of us being awarded the designation of a signature event, and knowing where we were in 2011, and without the support of the community, and knowing where we are today is a compliment to not just the efforts of the tournament, but the community, and also thank you in advance, and I'm happy to answer many questions and then some. So
Thank you for joining us.
thank you.
We'll start over here. Mr. Stanford, please, sir.
Steve, thank you for being here. Thank you for all your work and efforts on behalf of the tournament, which benefits the town. Could you characterize again for us the economic impact of the tournament on the economy's finances?
Absolutely. Ever since 1999, I've worked with the University of South Carolina, Beaufort, and Clemson to do an economic impact study, and we'll be doing another one this year. But it shows in excess of $102 million to this community since the last one that we did. And in addition to just the economic impact, there's 1,500 plus jobs supported, as well as we do know that 90% of the people that attend do come back to visit another time or two during the course of the year.
I'm a golfer, so I understand what a signature event means. That's a fairly new concept, just about a year old, maybe for the general public. If you could just characterize the difference between a signature event and a regular PGA event.
Yes, it's, we had a unique, we've always been considered an invitational tournament, which was a step below a few of the other tier of the tournaments, but we were recognized as a designated event last year. This year they've changed it to a signature event, and we're one of 8 tournaments below the majors that is recognized as basically a mini major, a step down from major with a limited field, but having the best players in the world guaranteed to play here. And again, it's a compliment. They're not just doing this. The PGA Tour wants to be here. The players want to be here. The network wants to be here. The media wants to be here. And that little 3-hour tour from Augusta works in our favor for many reasons as well. But it's, again, it's because of the efforts that have been put forth from our support, our sponsors, our town, our volunteers that they're here. And we stepped up in a big way in 2020 through the COVID year when they canceled our event. We ended up agreeing to being able to do it through efforts of working with the town, the county, and the state. And they recognized that. And they're like, if we want to be somewhere, we know where we want to be, and that's Hilton Head Island.
Great, thank you.
Alfred.
I have a few questions. What are the increases that you have requested or received from other sponsors, with the exception of RBC?
Well, as certainly as was mentioned before, too, we can look at our title sponsor, our presenting sponsor. Our title sponsor is more than double their sponsorship, which is 7 figures plus some in addition to all our sponsors. And our partnerships are different. Certainly the hospitality sponsorships are a little different than this partnership here. Our hospitality sponsors are about tickets and pro-am spots and hospitality, where the support from the town is about putting on the best tournament we can in support of the infrastructure of the tournament and all. So everyone has been asked. We're certainly sensitive to the ticket requests and those, or our ticket purchasers too, but in looking at elevating the experience, elevating the tournament itself, this is the support here from the town is helping us in doing that, and but all of our other partners and sponsors as well has been more than happy to step in there and see how they can continue to support the tournament.
I don't want to suggest any criticism. I think the Heritage Tournament is great, and I think the step up to a signature, which is probably not your signature, event is a good thing. The only question is, to what extent should we increase the contribution? Members of the town council, we have to think about, should we use that money for workforce housing or development limitations or something else? A quick look at the request increase in ticket prices, my mind reflected somewhere around 25 or 30% as a ticket price increase. The request that you are making of us is somewhat in excess of 67%, relatively large with the RBC, may be the largest increase that's being requested, which is, you may want to comment on.
Well, a couple things. We certainly look at, I'm trying to think, RBC certainly from their standpoint has stepped up in a way. The agreement is certainly was mentioned before.
We're not RBC.
No, yes, sir.
Don't consider what they do relevant to us.
No, and actually, as from the last meeting, which unfortunately I was unable to attend, the question was asked about us being able to do more things with the town. More than happy to do that. In years past, some of the support we've given the assets or some of the exposure to the chamber at the request of the town. But here we're willing to talk about additional exposure. There's been some discussion of a tent location, additional opportunities around the golf course, or around, as well as working with the likes of the networks and the media as well.
The way I read this is we can get additional exposure to those who are attendees, but that we would not get additional national exposure through the TV. That's regulated by the broadcast company, CBS. And we were advised that we could provide material to the announcers and they could choose what they want to say. It's somewhat hard for me to see that there's much additional benefit to the town for an increase of $200,000 over last year. And particularly since a fair amount of the proceeds are going to end up going to charity, and whether it's an appropriate matter for the town to give money that's going to charity. So there's a lot of concerns that I have about the level of the increase that requested.
Understood. If you'd like me to answer that too, there's, with regards to the CBS, as soon as that camera does go on, there is something of added value to this community that certainly is tremendous. Someone recently asked us, and this question wasn't asked, but they were saying, how much do we pay Jim Nance? You know, they thought he was on our payroll, and we're like, not a thing. And it's one of those things because we have him on video saying his favorite 3 hours in Augusta's 3-hour trip to Hilton Head. But understanding the question, the support from the economic impact, the charity component, let alone the businesses here showing the economic impact is certainly important to us working with all the local businesses that we do.
Good. James?
Thank you, Chair.
Good to see you.
Lead off by thanking you and your entire staff for working 365 days a year to bring a big event to the island that we're all proud of.
Thank you.
I also thank you for the additional information that was in our packet. I think that answered a lot of questions that I had. I think that our investment in this is important. And beyond just the dollars and economic impact that you referenced, this has been going on a long time, and there are thousands of resident volunteers who take a lot of enjoyment to participate. I think there is pride that is derived from that volunteerism. So I think it's important to our residents that this tournament flourishes, gets better and better every year. I think that the publicity that the town receives is very important on a couple of levels. One, it drives interest in coming to the island, i.e. it supports the tourism business. But maybe more important and the real opportunity for us in the town is how do we enhance the communication of our valued brand. We do have an opportunity to influence that 30-second segment and what goes in that. So I think that's very important. But every time somebody turns on their TV to watch the Heritage, they are seeing aspects of our community that I think drew all of us here. So it's important, I think incredibly important, for the world to see what Hilton Head has to offer, because some of those people are going to come here and live. So it's doing much more than driving 1,500 jobs or over $100 million in economic impact. So I think the additional investment worthwhile, but I'm willing to hear what other members of the dais have to say about what that fair increase is, because I do think there's an issue that we have to wrestle there.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks for being here again.
Oh, thank you.
And I want to congratulate you, as others have, as far as the elevation of our event. Is Tiger coming this year?
Might be.
Following up on the discussion around marketing, this council has been in pretty in-depth conversations with our DMO about sort of controlling our message and expanding our message, right? So I would just offer, the influence that you do have would hopefully line up with these new pillars that we have decided are important to us as a community as far as telling our story, all right? And the other part, the agreement really speaks to marketing and transportation as far as what these funds would be used for. And I am interested in knowing how that transportation piece funnels down to local, minority, disadvantaged business owners here on Hilton Head.
Well, a couple of things. Thank you all for your comments there too. With regards to the operation of the tournament, a few years back, when prior to us getting involved with the partnership here too, we weren't out at Honeyhorn, which we thank the support of Honeyhorn Coastal. We did not have transportation, some things to Coligny for more or less for the local residents as well. So that is where we've expanded our operations. And we have recently spoken to local, as we continue to do. We've offered the local transportation business here to work with us in some other areas in working with the bigger company per se. But we're, from the marketing side, Andrew Davis and Angela McSwain on our team, our communication marketing director, more than happy to sit down. They have a wonderful relationship to talk about the marketing side, but we're also open in many, many ways, let alone working with the likes of the Surge Group and the Hargraves and the Palm Electrics and the Greenery and other business here locally. We're more than happy to sit and talk with anybody who's, we'd be more than happy to utilize their services for sure.
Okay. I think we encourage that, particularly since these are local funds that are being increased.
Oh, absolutely. And if you, like I just mentioned, we look at whether it is the high schools or some of these other services, our local services, let alone, I did mention the Greenery Coastal Security, a lot of these local businesses that we do utilize, and certainly want to support the local. We're different, and I can get in and I can discuss a lot of different things too. We're different than I've been to a lot of other tournaments. We are community. If you go to Atlanta or Charlotte and some of these other places, the tournament really gets lost, and it's not. But we are, we're in this together. It's been a win-win-win. And in years past, and reaching out to the town, and it's yes is the answer. What's the question? And in return of how they can help us and how we can help you all too. So we're open for anything to continue to work together.
You have another question?
Yes. I just wanted, would you provide us with that list of local vendors?
Oh, certainly. Yes. And I mentioned, I can get into the hoteliers and the catering services and others that help us and, golf outings and different services, but we certainly will.
Thank you. That'd be great. Okay, if we have no further questions, thank you, Mr. Wilmot.
Yeah, I do have one other thing, which is interesting. The PGA Tour just recently through, in helping organizations transform lives and unify communities, recognize Alma Award as around the country in the Mitchellville effort. And I know we had talked about it, or Simon had talked about it briefly, or you did with CBS, but it's the PGA Tour recognized the importance of unifying the community, transferring the communities to getting better and working together. And it was something that just recently was awarded here in December. Was recognized as one of the 100 faces. So thank you in advance for your time. Thank you for your team. Certainly you've put a wonderful team together, Mark and Josh and others, and we look forward to seeing everybody here at a signature time and a signature event.
Thank you, sir. Okay, I'm going to open it up to public comment. We'll hear from them and then we'll come back to the dais for some action here. Anyone want to speak to this particular item? Okay, seeing none. I did entertain a motion for this particular item with a funding amount attached.
My view on this, excuse me, Steve, you want to go first? Whatever. My view is that the amount that's being asked for can be justified by the economic impact of this event, the importance of this event to this town. It is our signature event, and I would support it.
Mr. Alfred.
I'm in favor of the MOU as presented. I think the dollar amount should be substantially smaller, or in the range of $75,000 to $1,000, which would be 25 to 33% increase. 50,000 plus over the 300 that we paid last year.
350 is what James you have.
I guess I'm somewhere in the middle. I would be comfortable with 400,000.
Okay,
I'll make a motion on that basis. Move that the Finance Administration Committee approve a sponsorship agreement with Heritage Classic Foundation for the RBC Golf Tournament with the support of $400,000.
I'll second it.
okay. Probably
Are
move
we approving or are we recommending council approve?
this item will have to go to full council, Mr. Taft. You have to correct? This is the recommendation.
Right.
Okay. So we have a motion by Mr. Eames for 400K, second by Mr. Alfred. Any further discussion here? Ready for the question? All in favor? Raise your right hand. Thank you. Good, Kim? All right, we'll move on. Thank you again for the work there, Josh and Mr. Wilmot. Next, we'll have a resolution authorizing memorandum of understanding with the Coastal Community Development Corporation. Ruben.
Yes, sir. I've got a more formal presentation to help walk us through this issue this afternoon. So today I want to cover a little bit of history and background just for those that may be joining us for the first time on this issue, go over the intended use of funds as outlined in the request that was provided to the town. We'll review the memorandum of understanding and the terms that are in it, both the terms that are coming out of last month's F&A meeting, as well as some proposed points that have been raised by the Coastal Community Development Corporation. We're then going to look at what are the policy questions that must be answered in order to move this item forward, if that is the will of the committee to move this item forward. And then depending upon those answers, we'll look at the timelines that are involved for the procedural next steps, which identify a couple different paths that we can explore. So the town was contacted by representatives of the Coastal Community Development Corporation requesting funding in the amount of $600,000 that would be used to allow the organization to pursue acquisition of existing and variously located condominium units on Hilton Head Island. The organization would purchase those units, and they would, as they would become available on the open market, acquire them, record restrictive covenants with those units that would limit the area median income that could be applied to any future rental of the property. And then they would oversee the qualification and selection of the individuals who would occupy those units, and they'd be responsible for the management and maintenance of those units going forward into the future. This Coastal Community Development Corporation made an initial presentation to the Finance and Administrative Committee back in August of 2023. At that time, the committee requested that staff work with the organization to develop a draft memorandum of understanding that can be brought forward to this committee. We've been working on that jointly with this body. Most recently, at its December 19th meeting, the committee reviewed the first draft of that memorandum of understanding and provided a series of comments and feedback. So just to outline how the funds would be used, the Coastal Community Development Corporation is proposing as a phase one, the acquisition of 13 units on Hilton Head Island. The total budget for that phase one is $3 million. Of that, they're seeking $600,000 in funds from Hilton Head Island. They would place a 99-year covenant on the property tied to the outlined AMI levels. They've currently received a matching grant from $100,000 from the Community Foundation of the Low Country, along with $125,000 in donations that have been provided administrative or been fundraised for. And I believe Mr. Wolf may probably update that figure to be a little bit more accurate today, as I believe that has changed. And at the time that they provided that information, they'd already closed on 3 units, 2 in Wood Lake and 1 on Marshside. So in the memorandum of understanding, as was previously presented, the Coastal Community Development Corporation would use funding that is provided to acquire residential units for the express purpose of providing affordable workforce housing. The Coastal Community Development Corporation will be required to prepare and submit a funding plan that will detail with specificity how those funds will be utilized in a corresponding budget to provide information to the town that would identify how the funding would be used and in the context of additional funding that may be raised alongside with it. That proposed plan is submitted, and the information must also contain how they will provide for the future maintenance and management of those units. The Coastal Community Development Corporation must also identify the nature and extent to which the affordable housing units seek to acquire and will be protected from an affordability standpoint. That goes back to the restrictive covenants that would be applied to those units. So they would be required to provide us with a copy of that information and that language so that we would be able to know how that restriction would be placed and therefore protect the affordability of those units going forward into the future. Additionally, within the first draft, there was language that would prohibit the sale of any units acquired without first obtaining written permission of the town. It would also require that they submit an annual report identifying how those funds were in fact spent so that we could track those dollars. And that we would also ask for metrics that would be used to help us evaluate the effectiveness of that program. That way, going forward in the future, there's the ability to monitor the performance of it and understand, is it accomplishing the goals that it set out to accomplish? And then it would also require minimum insurance requirements for any units that were acquired or maintained under the agreement. Following the December 19th meeting, there was a number of revisions that were proposed by this body that have been incorporated into the current draft that's before you today. Those include clarification that the area median income ranges within the MOU would not be less than 30% nor greater than 120%. I want to take a moment to kind of address that because I know there's been some questions that have come up. I myself have learned recently that Beaufort County is the level at which the area median income is calculated. So it's calculated at the county level and applicable to Hilton Head Island. There also is several different area median income calculations that all come from the Department of Housing and Urban Development. So one of the things going forward in this document that I believe we need to do is the ranges can be the same, but we need to state with specificity the area median income metric that we are referencing. To give you an example, when you used to talk about interest rates that would be adjustable, they would say it's tied to some index. Well, you would identify with specificity which index that rate would be tied to, the LIBOR or the whatever. We would need to do the same thing here. We would need to state what calculation of area median income will be that 30 to 120% so that we're operating off of the same language going forward. Additionally, in the requested provisions from the last meeting was to insert language that the monthly rent that any unit would be charged would not exceed 30% of the household income of the applicant that would be selected for that unit. So not only would there be a restrictive covenant on the property itself, but from a programmatic standpoint, anybody that would be selected for a particular unit could not be charged more than 30% of their annual income. That 30% figure is a recommendation as a best practice in terms of affordable housing. We also added an indemnification language to limit the town's liability for any actions or liability arising under the memorandum. We added language requiring the submission of the restrictive covenants as part of the annual plan and funding request. We inserted language requiring active employment on Hilton Head Island as an express condition of the selection to occupy any of the workforce housing units created under the agreement. And we removed language regarding the development of workforce housing and made sure that it was clear that it's just going to be the acquisition of existing residential or multifamily housing units. Lastly, we added language to prohibit providing a preference to housing applicants based upon their employer and the nature of the employment. You can see I've got a star there. I know Mr. Wolf is going to address that when he makes his remarks, but it impacts their ability to do private fundraising as part of this program. And so I know he's going to take an opportunity to kind of express how they would like to approach that item. And then additionally, there's language requiring the reinvestments from the proceeds of the sale of any unit that are required under this memorandum. So remember, in the first draft, we have a requirement that any sale would have to be done with our express permission. Now we're adding additional language that says, and that sale revenue proceeds would have to be reinvested in the acquisition of comparable workforce housing units. So those initial terms plus those additional terms are now incorporated into the attached document that is in today's materials for consideration by the committee. So, moving forward, the questions that this body must determine if we are going to take action. The first is to finalize the terms of the memorandum of understanding. We need to get to a point where we are all on the same page, we're all in agreement between us and the Coastal Community Development Corporation, so that we have a document that can then be forwarded to town council for consideration. Second, we have to determine a critical path for the timing on this action. If funding is going to be recommended, we have two options, and I'm going to show you a schedule here in just a second that outlines both. But we have the opportunity to consider a request of funding under the FY24, so this current year's affiliated agency funding program, or we have the ability to consider it as part of the soon-to-be upcoming FY25 affiliated agency funding program. And the timelines for both of those looks like this. So on January, January 9th meeting got moved to today. So January 11th, we're considering the MOU. January 17th, the Planning Commission is going to be taking up the item of amending the comprehensive plan to incorporate the housing impact analysis. As you recall, that is a required step in order to use state accommodation tax funds for workforce housing purposes. So that was advertised back in December. The public hearing is going to occur in January. And then coming out of that, that item is going to go to the Public Planning Committee for consideration at its February 8th meeting. Assuming that this body moves forward with the MOU, that would then be taken to town council for consideration at its February 20th meeting. And then following that, the March 5th and March 19th meetings would be used to do two things. One, adopt the ordinance amending the town's comprehensive plan to include the workforce housing analysis and a corresponding budget amendment if this body recommends and council agrees that it be funded under the FY24 affiliated agency budget. If the choice or the recommendation is to move forward under the FY25 affiliated agency timeline, we are actively in that process. On January 2nd, applications went live for the upcoming fiscal year. Those are due at the end of this month. In March, the Finance and Administration Committee will take up a review of those items and will potentially accept presentations or discussions on the applications. At its April 16th meeting, this committee will then develop recommendations to town council for incorporation into the upcoming budget. And then, as you can see, town council is anticipated to have first and second reading of the annual budget ordinance on May 7th and June 4th, respectively. So then the last question is, once we've finalized the terms of the MOU, we've identified which path we're going to recommend for council to move forward under. The last item is the dollar value that would be attached to that. And so as part of today's agenda, you see that there's an item on there for potential consideration of an FY24 affiliated agency application, both for the Coastal Community Development Corporation and for the Hilton Head Island Regional Habitat for Humanity. That, I believe, brings us up to where we are at today, and I'll turn it back over to you for discussion.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gruber, and thank you for laying out how we will move forward. So we've got two questions before us that we will be taking action on immediately, and then one further down in the agenda. But we're gonna put a pin in that. First of all, if there are any further questions for Mr. Gruber, and I'd like to offer up an opportunity for Mr. Wolf to come up and give us some clarity on the point that had the asterisk next to it. Anything for Mr.
Just
Gruber?
to understand the two questions about which application year to apply. We're talking about a difference of approval in March versus approval in June. That gives us some more wiggle room because government, we've learned, does move a little slowly in a choppy way. So that may make more sense. I'm not interested in delaying it, but it doesn't seem to me like that's much of a delay.
Yes, sir. We just want to make sure you're aware of the options that are available for discussion.
Thank you.
Are there any other ramifications between fiscal 24 and 25? Budget amendment if we do it earlier?
Yes, if the committee recommends to council and if council approves that the funding be done under this current budget year, we would need to do a budget amendment, which we are anticipating doing actually at this same time anyway. So we would include that information when that budget amendment comes forward. Otherwise, it would go forward under the FY25 timeline and would just be incorporated as part of the budget ordinance.
Aside from having to do a budget ordinance, are there any other downsides from doing it earlier?
I can't say that there's a downside or an upside. It's a question for this body to determine what they think is the most appropriate. Both are options that could be pursued really without any kind of policy ramifications that I'm aware of.
Thank you.
Super themes. Okay, Mr. Wolf, please. Thank you, Josh.
Okay, thanks. Councilman Brown?
Afternoon.
Thank you. Council members. Would like to touch base on Josh's asterisk that he pointed out, which is a topic along the preference that had been identified at the last FNA meeting. I think there was some misunderstanding potentially. There was no preference ever intended in our organization for anybody unless there was an affiliate who brought equity to the transaction and purchase of a unit. So the idea was to have and remains to have a business entity, no one has done this yet, but to be able to say to a business, if you'd like to provide 20% of the down payment for a unit, thank you very much. If you'll do that for 2 units, we'd give you a preference on 1 so that you're solving the challenge for our community in a 1-to-1 ratio as you're solving it for yourself. And that was the idea behind the preference. I don't think that was ever really brought into focus for the committee. And then the second follow-up would be, of course, a donation from a business or a corporation in the 20% total of purchase price would also qualify for that preference on 1 unit. Our wish would be to continue to operate with that as part of the model, but happy to answer any questions about that preference as it came up in the previous instance.
Okay. Alfred?
I gather, Mr. Wolf, that you're saying that it would help solicit private donations if there could be a preference on 1 out of 2 units.
That's correct. That's exactly right. We would love to see this not just with town support and not just altruistic community resident support, which we have garnered, but also, of course, businesses need to be a crucial part of this to step up. We've been asking for workforce housing solutions for 7 years that I'm aware of, and this is a good avenue for a business to do it without taking on, risk of having to go buy units entirely, which is a challenging thing because they have to get into the management side of it.
Themes.
Mr. Wolf.
Sure.
I asked the question about the preference treatment at the last meeting. That going to be documented as a part of our MOU? I don't need the detail. I mean, if you want.
Yes, sir. So what we had in there originally, and this was coming out of last month's meeting, was language that said that there would be no preferential treatment given. And then what's being requested is a modification to that to clarify that if funding is provided, that preference can be provided so long as an equal number of units are provided publicly without preference.
I got the 2-to-1, and that's for 3% money for 10 years?
Yes, that is correct.
That's an investor incentive program.
Correct.
Okay, got it. Like the concept, that's good. But there's also your statement about if a business wants to invest $50,000, not on the 10-year 3%, that they also get first right of refusal.
Yes, but there'd be no strings attached. That equity would be used without any repayment. It's a donation.
Right, correct.
Yep.
So if there are.
So it has higher value, of course, to the community.
So if there are 13 units that you're going after, first tranche, $50,000 times 13, $650,000. What if the businesses were to reserve all 13? What would our 600,000 be?
Well, the way that we presented it, it does not count on any preference from business. And we've already generated enough residential support through altruistic capital that we're ready and prepared to deploy that against it, which would provide no more than 6 units in preference because it's a 1-to-1 relationship. 6 would be unencumbered.
I guess what I'm asking is there a drawdown provision of our $600,000? need it all at one time to
It
spend?
has been contemplated as a drawdown, and I believe it would stay that way because the CCDC is evaluating any unit that's available for sale on an independent basis. The deal may be good or bad. Occasionally, there are groups of units that this could be applied for, but I can't predict that at the time.
One further question. If a unit has an employee in it that changes jobs, how do you resolve that issue?
They are free to stay there until the application, until they have to reapply at the end of a one-year lease, in which they still have to be locally employed. They wouldn't be displaced as long as they still have a local job with the business. And then that employer who had a preference for a unit would be then eligible for another unit when it comes available.
Okay, thank you very much. Those are my questions.
Okay. Stanford?
Thank you. I would favor a provision in the MOU, if it's not already there, that limits it to a one-year lease. The idea being that if someone gains employment somewhere else or gains employment at a higher wage than would be covered, when that lease came up for renewal, then they would no longer be eligible and they would need to move out. So I assume that that's acceptable to you.
Then that's the way that the organization is designed. It's annual recertification, and if you exceed the income requirements, then you're given the notice that you have graduated and move on, and we'll give you a path to do so.
Understood. I may have the preferences confused. What I was seeing there was it looked like there were some pledges, if you will, of financial support. And if that is the way it works, it seems to me that the town's contribution should come in kind of as matching funds on some sort of formula, to where we know that, in fact, the investor funds are coming in. It's not relying solely on the town's funds.
That's exactly how we've designed it and discussed it to this point. It's a matching situation, so we'd be open to that.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you.
Anything further?
Nope, thank
Good. I saw Mr. Gruber jotting down as the conversation was going on. So it seems like we are able to make some adjustments based on the questions and the responses that Mr. Wolf has provided.
Yes.
Yes.
If there's desire to move this out and on to town council, I'll incorporate that in a proposed motion that I can provide to you that would incorporate that clarification. One other item I did want to add, just for the knowledge of this body, is that the town's Housing Action Committee at its meeting in November had an opportunity to look at both of these proposals and voted to support both proposals. And so just wanted to convey that information to you as well.
Okay.
Josh, I've got another question for you. We impose a 99-year covenant on a unit. For whatever reason, the decision is made to sell that unit. That covenant would continue to run with the title to the land.
Yeah, unless extinguished, it would continue to run with the land and would presumably impact the value of that unit.
It would suppress the value of that unit. I don't know if there's a workaround on that. That's not the intention, but it seems to me that that is a side effect in the event of a sale of a unit.
I would say that it would always be tied to that same AMI level. And the AMI has risen, I believe, 8 of the last 9 years on Hilton Head, and very dramatically over the last couple of years. So it's not going to be capped, certainly, in its value. It's going to pursue at the same rate as the AMI would increase.
I'm just talking about a unit that is on the open market after it's been in the program will have a suppressed value because of the covenant that's running there.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's the intention at all.
No, it would simply be for the units that the CCDC owns, also potentially creating a higher value for the units that are on the open market without the covenant restriction.
Just a question.
In my mind, it's similar to, you can buy a piece of property that has a conservation easement on it. You can still own it, you can still occupy it, but your ability to use it has been affected by that, and so it does have an impact on the value.
I understand something about that.
Could we touch item 9A, which was just the insurance coverage around fire? There was a note in here saying fire insurance with limits equal to replacement cost of any structure would be covered in this agreement. Of course, all the regimes that we pay on a monthly basis include such coverage. We just want to say unless already included in the regime.
Okay.
Questions on it?
We're good here? Okay, so before we take any motions, I'm going to open it up for public comment so we can hear.
I second that.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Wolf.
Yes, sir.
Okay, public comment on this particular item. Okay, yes.
Hi, I'm Angie Hutchins in Shipyard. I've got so many questions, as I've heard other comments along the way and from y'all's discussion. But number one, from the newer discussion, there's so many questions, and that invites me to ask you, who decides with all these questions of how this is going to work, since this is largely untested and unproven? It may be a great idea, but having so many government bodies, having money at stake, tax dollars at stake, what happens if these different municipalities, that if they procure pledges from all of them, what happens if y'all are in disagreement? I wonder about what happens with that sort of conflict, and then it's just up for them to decide. It's also very confusing to me because somebody's going to be patrolling, or somebody's going to have to be administering these leases. If there are these people going to have full-time employment requirements, could they work on the island one day a month? Is that going to be something else? And those are just the questions that have already been asked in terms of administration and who gets what and how to play fair. There's just an unending stream of questions that makes me wonder, who are you going to employ to be able to take care of all these questions and contrivances as they come up, instead of letting the free market run and having 99-year, there's just so many things, sorry. The 99-year lease that runs with the title to that property, if something happens to this group, there's so many issues. How do you're making so many more problems potentially by having government money and taxpayer dollars be part of this plan, instead of letting them get the businesses and the investors and the philanthropies all involved and have more freedom for them to manipulate. I can't understand building this bigger of a machine within the government. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir. One up.
You promised.
We recorded that promise too.
Larry Landry, 123 Fort Walker Drive in Hilton Head. I want to urge approval of this on the critical path timeline. I've been coming to council meetings since 2015, and we've talked about workforce housing since 2015 that I remember. As the song goes, the time for hesitation is through. No need to wallow in the mire. I won't go any further in the song, but showing my age. But there is a bias for action needed. You have an esteemed nonprofit board. It's a proven model in other communities. Nothing's ever perfect, but you've got a strong MOU. You've got checks and balances in place. It's time to move forward, and it's time to do it now. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Thank you for letting me speak one more time. Johns Marsley, Hilton Head Plantation. First, I want to speak about our preference, the money that you all propose to give to them. What preference do we have for those units? It sounds like we should have a preference. Second of all, who should have priority on those units? We have nurses who need places to stay. We know the problems the hospital is having. No issue about that. It's our money. We should have a preference. Also, the issue with less than 30%. At that 30% mark, who is getting these units? Are the people that we believe need affordable housing actually getting these units? We have no say in any of this. So please take those into consideration. This is our money. We should have a right to dictate how it's used for affordable housing. We all believe that it's an important issue. Lastly, regarding the Housing Action Committee, whether or not it's been approved prior, you've made modifications. There's modifications again. It should be brought down to the people. Let them work these issues out. That's why you created that whole process. Stop usurping it. We've spent hours of energy, time, and staff to create a housing action, workforce housing process. Please take that into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm gonna stay on this side of the room because I had Ms. Xiaodan Lee, I'm sorry, got to first, and then I got you after that, Ms. Caitlin Lee. Ms. Xiaodan, please.
Thank you, Council Member. I support workforce housing initiatives that make sense, and I have tremendous respect for Ellen and the CCDC investors. As I see it, this is what the committee yes vote on the MOU would look like if no changes are made to the terms. One, the town will provide at least 50% of equity, but no ownership. And we don't know who or what entity will manage CCDC's rent-controlled properties. Two, the $600,000 initial investment will fund the purchases of 6 properties that currently house 12 workers based on unknown criteria. 3, in the event that CCDC ceases to exist, the town will, I quote, assume the ownership and responsibilities for these units under the same terms and conditions outlined herein, which means that taxpayers who don't support the government subsidized housing program to begin with would potentially be liable to paying mortgages and returning the altruistic investors' principal plus 3% annualized return. 4, history tells us that the housing market goes up and down, as I showed you in the Exhibit 1. It's not realistic to assume a 4.17% increase for 10 years. In addition, reserves need to be built up to compensate for rising property insurance, regime fees, and property taxes. Failure to do so would require the town to step in the future to sustain CCDC's operations. 5, last but not least, given the 5-year term of the MOU, any new housing policies changes by the council within that period of time requires CCDC's consent, especially related to the vague income requirements of not be less than 30% nor greater than 120% of the AMI. CCDC and the taxpayers deserve to know how many units will be at what percentage before further investments are made. The CCDC plan helps very few lucky ones, but would take inventories away from the working families who want to own homes and put roots down on Hilton Head. The ATAX bill mandates home ownership programs. The reason those people can't buy is not necessarily because they can't afford monthly mortgage payments, which could be less than rent, as I shown you in Exhibit 2, but because they have to serve car loans, student loans, or credit card debt, and they don't have enough savings for the down payment. Also, the latest census data indicated that Hilton Head has an occupancy rate of 57%, which means that more than 13,000 housing units are either sitting empty or for short-term rental. I am optimistic that together we can figure out a viable way to convert 10% or 1,300 of those units into long-term rental for workers without using taxpayer dollar. Thank you.
Thank you. Caitlin.
Hi, everybody. Caitlin Lee. I am up here today to voice my support. I hope that this moves forward. I heard we need more support for our creative solutions that our community has brought forward. I also just want to remind people we're talking a lot about numbers here today, and this CCDC has already put people in homes. And similar to Habitat for Humanity, which has also put people in homes on Hilton Head, we're saying some people have said it's unproven, but CCDC has purchased property and is utilizing this model already. So some people have said it's unproven. I would say that's maybe not so much. Also, these are, like I said, people. About 2 months ago, I was having a conversation and I realized with a group of people who were all lovely and nice, but as I look around this room right now also, I don't see anybody who has been in a situation where, for no fault of their own, they are within one phone call of losing their housing. That's all it takes is for one owner to decide, I'm going to short-term rent this, I'm going to sell it to the highest bidder, or I'm going to raise your rent 25% to meet quote-unquote market rate. I have been there multiple times. Many people in this room have probably not been there, especially not on Hilton Head, and the anxiety that produces and the loss of productivity, as I'm sure Alan Wolf can tell you, probably how many people have come to his office crying. They have to leave Hilton Head because they can't find a place to live. This is something that's happening every day. We have 2 organizations who are working very hard to prevent that from happening. All of these lovely people behind me, their generation has not been routed out completely. And we just heard earlier today in a meeting that people with families are leaving. The number of people living per unit on this island has decreased. We're seeing it already. And unfortunately, it's not the people making these decisions and making these comments right now who are being affected every day by the lack of housing inventory on Hilton Head Island. It is people my age and younger. And the housing market has failed. It has failed. We have people in all levels of federal government. Lindsey Graham has said that our housing market has failed. These are 2 solutions, and this one specifically that's going to help solve that here on Hilton Head. We have plenty of money. Nobody made a comment when we're giving a private organization $400,000 to sponsor a golf tournament. Not one question or comment was made. This is $600,000 that's going to affect people on Hilton Head.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Thank you. My name is Paul Shearer. I live in Sea Pines. I'm a Canadian. I've owned and managed multi-residential properties all my life. And believe me, you folks don't know what you're getting involved with. This is not for the faint of heart. You're going to rent out units at 30% of income, which means that they're going to sublet it, or they're going to turn it into a Airbnb, because they can make money. You're not going to have control of these units. They're going to be spread all over the island. Who is going to manage them on a daily basis? How do you know who's living in these units? You'll give them till the end of the year, so if they move in on January, in December, you might find out that the guy who you rented to isn't living there. Who manages that? What happens if the rent wasn't paid? What happens if they didn't pay the utilities? Are you going to pay the utilities? How are you going to be insured for this? If you're not managing it and you're not a hands-on on-site landlord, your insurance is going to double and triple. Who is going to fix up a unit that is completely trashed from somebody who doesn't care? How do you know? How do you know if you won't know for 10 months if he's still working for the same person, but it becomes he says, I still want to stay there, but I have a different job now. I deal with this every day currently, because where I live, in my building right now, rents have raised so dramatically that the average rent is $1,100. The average rent is $2,200 in my jurisdiction. I get $1,200. My units are all being subletted because the tenants are making more money than me on the property. And I can't police it. And I live there and I have a superintendent who lives there. I don't live in a unit. My superintendent lives in a unit, and we can't police these properties. And you are going to have properties spread all over the island, and you won't know who's living where. And you're going to be responsible. Think about that. I want to leave you with one thought. The biggest slumlord in Canada is the city of Toronto.
I had another comment on this side. Yes.
Good afternoon, committee members. My name is Matt Sweeney, and I live in Indigo Run. At your last meeting, I asked you to consider the people who will be negatively impacted by CCDC's business model. Purchasing power that's backed by the government will crowd out other property buyers, and rent-controlled dwellings adjacent to owner-occupied dwellings will diminish property values. People may be harmed, and I think the town has an obligation to transparently evaluate that. Many town councilmen and staff believe government-subsidized housing will lead to a surplus of dwellings, but it's actually people who are subsidized, not the dwellings. So I'd like to talk about the people who would benefit from subsidies. First, there's the lucky few who are selected as tenants. These winners are presumed to provide essential benefits to our community, but what are the measurable benefits? Is it quicker table service? Is it cheaper legal services? I believe that metrics to measure success or failure should be determined before you spend money. The second beneficiary will be employers. Will the subsidies provide incentive for employers to pay below market wages to staff? If the housing and workforce shortage on the island is so dire, why haven't we seen a net loss of businesses? According to the town's 2022 comprehensive financial report, business license accounts issued jumped from a 10-year average of about 6,000 or 7,000 per year to 12,574 in financial year 2022. That's a 75% increase. The deputy town manager, Gruber, told a group of residents that about 120 non-rental businesses moved on to the island last year. Businesses typically don't invest in communities where they can't find employees. Markets always achieve equilibrium eventually. On the other hand, government subsidies will artificially distort the market, and more businesses may choose to operate on Hilton Head because they get those extra benefits, and that will exacerbate the housing workforce shortage situation. Finally, I have a couple of questions about government subsidies. The first one, is it prudent for government to use taxpayer money to get a nonprofit up and running? Number two, is it legal for government to fund an operation that would guarantee private investors a positive return on their investment? I don't know the answer, but we taxpayers expect you to have a clear answer on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Melinda Tanner, I wasn't sure whether to speak now or if you're going to talk about affiliated agency money for this, and I'd have opportunity to speak then.
We're going to take up the affiliated agency portion later on in the agenda.
Okay, I'll speak then.
Coming back to you, Mr. Wolf. Yes, sir.
Good afternoon, council members. John Casey, Indigo Run. As you've already heard here, and I'm sure you're going to hear a lot more of, there are so many unanswered questions that proceeding along the timeline previously presented just doesn't seem to make sense in trying to resolve all those questions. So I'm just going to focus on one that's kind of piqued my interest, which is the distribution of the rentals within the proposed AMI. You know, the lawyer in me always gets a little perturbed when there are unexplained inconsistencies in action, whether that's what a witness says or municipal action. So I'd like to go to the recent past. In the very recent past, a private developer came before the council wanting to use private capital on private property to create a development in a partnership with other private entities, and was in essence compelled to include sort of an affordable housing component because the town had the leverage to do so concerning a parking variance. At the time, that same AMI was ultimately used, the 30 to 120%. But I remember hearing almost a sense of outrage from the council that there was the possibility that a great number of those units might be rented to people toward the higher end of the range of that AMI as sort of a division between who's a worthy and unworthy worker. And that was when private money was involved, where I guess you could disagree, but I don't think the municipal government had any business getting involved in telling what the developer to do. Now, in comparison, we're using public money. That's our money. It's money over which the council has stewardship, but not ownership. And yet, using the same AMI range and looking at the proposed rentals within that range, 70% of them will be rented to individuals making $100,000 or more. I don't understand the difference between the real concern when a private developer was involved and the seeming willingness now to allow these rentals to occur at the higher end of the range. And I think that's just one of the many questions which needs to be carefully considered before anything like this proposal can move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, Mr. Wolf.
Thank you. Happy to clear a couple of these up real quick. The distribution was covered in May at the original request and detailed in the agenda package. The requirement of distribution of AMIs is you may have to meet South Carolina and IRS Fair Harbor rules. 1 unit up to 50% of AMI, that's household income, 2 units up to 80%, and 1 unit up to 120%. So there's a prescribed maximum, and it's across that spectrum. One of the speakers, public comments was around preference from John. I agree. I would love for the town to enact a preference if this grant would be made by town council. We have 1 vacant unit that we purchased last week, and I reached out to the Hilton Head Fire Department. That's just the type of organization we would like to see with a preference. They have an officer who's going to be out of the house in March. We've asked him to apply, but if we could have the town in a preference scenario, we would love that as we try and get this thing off the ground. Another one of the comments from Andrew is a bigger machine within government. This pivot is a pivot 5 or 6 years in the making, in that you have had town staff research other communities, and I have done this as well through our work with the Chamber of Commerce, including Charlotte, North Carolina, Charleston, South Carolina, Greenville, Delray Beach, Florida, Aspen, Colorado, and Steamboat Springs, to realize that this is not the town of Hilton Head Island owning and managing rental housing. This is finding an affiliated agency, a partner in a nonprofit, just like Habitat for Humanity, to do this work in a sound manner so that you don't carry the risk that if it were to go belly up, that you have any risk ahead of you. We have employed bank financing for up to 60% of the purchase price. If the property was foreclosed on, the covenant would fall off. That's absolutely part, as it is in Aspen, Colorado. If the covenants are removed and the property is sold at market price and the bank washes their hands, again, no risk to the town. And as far as the request of who's living in these units across these percentages, we had an $80,000 restaurant general manager end up on a couch on January 1st because his unit went to the short-term market, making $80,000. He's at 110% AMI for a household of 1. That's a good wage, but that explains why the range is so wide. The CCDC is interested in providing housing across the workforce spectrum that is demanded by a high-level community like Hilton Head Island. That's why we're across those bandwidths from 50 to 120% with this grant request. And lastly, the promissory notes. These are unsecured debt instruments that the CCDC is getting from altruistic residents in the community to help fund this. So they are not a guaranteed return. If this fails, the town is not guaranteeing a return for private citizens. Thank you.
Yes.
Good afternoon. Happy New Year. A couple of things. I'll take a lot less than 3 minutes. I just want to go through the overview.
Identify yourself, Ken.
What's that?
Identify yourself.
Oh, I'm sorry. Kenneth Campbell, 17-year resident of Hilton Head Island, and also, full disclosure, a board member of CCDC, and I volunteer my time and effort. It's not a paid position.
I think, as you well know, but just so the audience is aware, it's not a paid position. And I'm very happy to be involved in the workforce housing issue on the island, which is a very serious one, and most everybody recognizes that. Just a quick overview. November, it was mentioned previously, but November of 22, the town council at that point made a very, very important decision, and they adopted the 4-pillar plan. The last pillar of that, as was also mentioned earlier, was finance, and that's really what we're dealing with today. At that time, that plan invites partners and invited the town residents to come in and say, hey, here's how we can help. And there hasn't been much reaction to that. I really wish that people that recognize the problem would come up and compete for dollars from the town to solve this problem. It's unfortunate that we only have 2 applications today. I wish this was going to be a much longer meeting. We had a lot more applications. We made our first request in August of 22. We implemented our program starting in May of 23. Through today, we now have 6 units that we have acquired, and our plan is to acquire the additional 7 for this program prior to the end of March. We have funds, we have private funds that have been pledged and are collectible, and we expect to have those collected, but it stops if we can't get that done. People have made those pledges and are questioning, okay, now, when are we going to sign our agreements and deposit the funds? We need to have the town's partnership to accomplish that. So finally, I just suggest we have a critical path up there. And it truly is a critical path. So we really implore you to take the fiscal 24 plan and put this in action. So we have your funds, we can close on the rest of the units, and we can get the community involved for the other 80% that's required. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Seeing no more, I will bring it back to Dias for further discussion. Mr. Gruber, are you good?
Yes, sir.
Do we want to hear from Mr. Gruber as far as a proposed motion for us to take action on? Is that okay with?
Josh, a question again about the 99-year covenant.
Mm-hmm.
Is it legally possible for the covenant to drop away in the event of sale?
I know that a covenant can be released, but I would turn to the town attorney who is involved in a lot more real estate work than I am to potentially answer that question more specifically.
Councilman Schaefer, what is the question?
The program calls for a 99-year covenant, maintaining it as rental property. But it also, the program allows a sale of a unit, provided that the proceeds are reinvested. And what we've been told is that in the event of sale of a unit, the covenant, the 99 covenant, would expire or extinguish itself. I'm just saying, is that possible?
Depends on how the covenant is written. If
you wrote it.
Well, if the intention was for it to last for 99 years, I would not write it in a way that would have it evaporate on a sale. I mean, that's all the question of how the contract term is written with respect to whether it remains something that runs with the title of the property or not. And who has the right to enforce it, for that matter.
So you're saying it can be crafted?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. So based upon what I've heard today, there are 2 items that I would propose to put in the draft memorandum of understanding terms. The first is language clarifying that their qualification and eligibility determinations will be done on an annually reoccurring basis. And then the second is clarifying that funding would be provided on a drawdown basis, not just upfront.
Annually refunding means upon expiration of an annual lease.
Correct. Yes. So we wouldn't say a specific date because the leases may be entered into individually, but that lease would have to be reevaluated annually. Okay. And then the third one is, and I would need direction from this committee, The question about the preference language, as it stands now, the language says no preference will be given. The CCDC is requesting that that be amended to be in line with their fundraising, which would allow for preference to be given on a one-for-one basis. One preference for funds that are provided, one unit that's available to the public.
I raised that question last month. I would support adding that language to it, but I also heard Mr. Wolf say that he would like the town involved. And I think that to the extent the town is contributing money to make this a successful endeavor, I certainly believe that the town should have the conversation that says this is what is most important to the town.
Okay.
Does that mean a preference will be given to an employee of the town if met the income requirements and so forth?
I would presume so, but,
I'm just trying to flesh that idea out.
That's exactly right.
Okay, so we would clarify that language to say that the selection of occupants for those units would be based on funding contributions and individuals identified by the town on a one-to-one basis. Is that accurately reflected? Okay, so those would be the three amendments that we would then put into the draft 2 and move forward to town council for consideration. So the motion would be moving to approve the memorandum of understanding forward with those three amendments.
I would make that motion.
Second.
Okay, further discussion?
I just want to say, as I said before, that workforce housing is a critical issue throughout our community. This is a creative program. We have other creative programs that have been offered by others. We need to take advantage of all of these that we can to work through our workforce housing issue. And I think this is a valuable way to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stanford. Ready for the question? All in favor? Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, please, Mr. Alfred.
The framework that we as members of the committee and council are approaching this, first of all, workforce housing is a public purpose. The council has determined that, the state seems to agree. Second of all, you've made clear that funds are available for this purpose. It would be very nice if it could be financed by the private sector, but that isn't going to happen. We certainly appreciate the efforts that the private sector has made, encourage them to continue to do so, but they're not going to be the complete answer to this situation. The town and public funds have to be involved if we're going to make progress on dealing with workforce housing. This is a variation of different forms of approach to try to solve the problem. I think we all up here and perhaps in the audience agree that a variety of approaches is necessary to deal with this problem. What we are all experiencing today is something that councils and legislative bodies have to engage in on a regular basis, which is determining what the future is going to be. We are, in a sense, engaging in prognostication. We have our crystal balls as to what's going to happen in the future. Members of the audience have their crystal balls as what they think is going to happen in the future. This effort is part to gather the thoughts of what people's crystal balls show. And Mr. Gruber has summarized the additions that have come out today. Do we know that they're going to work? We know what's going to fail? Absolutely not. A lot of it will work. You can almost guarantee that things in certain regards will not work because we're prognosticating about the future. So I think we need to move forward and try this out. We have a little bit of experience so far in the months that they've been operating. And I think that we need to have an opportunity to see a full year with town funding to see how it goes. We will find things that need to be changed. We will find things that are right and so forth. but we've got to try it to see what the situation is. None of us is going to get the future exactly right.
Thank you, Mr. Alfred. Yes, Mr.
One more. You've given us 2 different fiscal years. Is it feasible to work this through in the current fiscal year? I see you've got dates down here, but in a practical world, can it work?
Yes, sir. So if the committee is going to recommend that funding be provided from state accommodations taxes, then yes, we can do it this year, but we have to go through the comprehensive plan amendment process, and then we would have to adopt that as part of a budget amendment. But it is possible to do it within this fiscal year.
Okay. Let's deal with the motion on the table, which is to bring forth the recommendation in town council for approval of the memorandum of understanding with the adjustment that Mr. Gruber has made, which has been properly moved and seconded, right? Okay. Any further discussion on that piece? No? Okay, now we will ask the question. All in favor, please raise your right hand. Thank you. Okay, now to Councilman Stanford's point. The path that you have on display here, Mr. Gruber. Pleasure amongst the committee on this.
I would say that if it's practical, let's go ahead and try and get it done in this fiscal year. That's the reason I asked the question. I'm not seeking delay for the purpose of delay, but I don't want to impose on us an unreasonable schedule.
You making that as a motion, Mr. Sanford?
Yes, I would move to do it in the current fiscal year.
Thank you. Okay, further discussion? All in favor? Thank you. Okay, thank you, Mr. Gruber.
Thank you.
Next, we have consideration of resolution authorizing a memorandum of understanding with Habitat for Humanity to support workforce housing. I understand that Habitat has a presentation that they would like to share. Give you a break, Mr. Gruber, and have Ms. Dooley approach. Afternoon.
Afternoon. I will make this a very short presentation. Thank you so much for having us back, and hopefully with the questions that we answered at the last meeting that have been spelled out now. Thank you to Josh for getting that taken care of in the MOU. I hope that we can move things forward. I really just want to focus on a couple of slides that we have here, because you've seen some of these in the past. This is my simple little jigsaw puzzle here that gives you some of the basics of what it takes to make our program work. I want to talk about families for just a second, because I've heard some comments made here today about who are these people and who are we serving, and do they deserve to be served. These are hardworking families that we select to be in our program. They go through a mortgage application process just like anybody else in the room that has a mortgage. They qualify for that to come into our program. They are folks that are working in our schools, in our doctor's offices, in our grocery stores. They're families who have their own businesses to clean homes here in the community, do home repairs here in the community. They're hardworking families that have been selected to be in our program. And then the other reason that we're here, those three pieces up at the top, we know that we have our volunteers, we know that we have our donors, some of them are here with us today. And families, we always have enough folks coming to us looking for housing. It's the land that we're struggling with right now and what we're asking for assistance with. Excuse me. So since the last meeting when we talked about this MOU, the things that I feel like we've clarified that Josh has been able to get into the MOU for us is that we would be looking at families who are working on the island. We have no problem with that. We've clarified that our mortgage document does have specifically in it that Habitat has the first right of refusal. Our families will do their sweat equity hours and put their piece into making this program work. They'll be taking those classes on home ownership skills to help them be successful homeowners. And then they'll have an affordable mortgage that they repay to Habitat, which we reinvest in future houses for families. And then a question that was brought up last time about the short-term rentals. That's part of our covenant that they can't be used as short-term rentals. And then you got this the last time, and I'm not going to go through it this time either. I just want, out of that, I just want to be clear that we're here, we've been here, we're here willing to work. We have a model that does work successfully, and we feel like with the town, partnering with the town, we can be more effective at it and do more. So, questions?
Thank you. Have any questions for Ms. Dooley before Mr. Gruber comes up to entertain the details of the MOU? Yes.
I'll just repeat something that Ms. Dooley has heard 5 or 6 times before, but it's just important, I think, to say that the site plan and number of units that we were able to provide on a piece of ground that in effect the town is buying is critically important.
Variation of that, I understand that the emphasis is going to be on multifamily, not single-family dwellings.
It would be something we are looking at, yes. It can go either way depending on the property that we have and what we can do.
My standpoint, from the view of the town, is we want the biggest bang for the buck.
Absolutely.
To help the most families we can. If we can have multifamily on this property instead of just single-family, we'll have a bigger impact.
Make sure we're using the right terms. Multifamily can be a townhouse that fits with the density of the zoning.
Yes.
I have no questions, thank you.
Great, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So again, we'll just cover some quick history and background, the intended use of the funds under this request, the memorandum of understanding, both the initial terms that were presented, the revisions that were requested at the last meeting, the policy questions that this body will need to address if it wants to move this item forward for further action to town council, and again, those procedural steps. So there's some overlap, but there's also a lot of significant differences that I want to discuss about this particular request. So again, as part of background, in fiscal year 2024, this current fiscal year, the Hilton Head Regional Habitat for Humanity applied to receive funding as an affiliated agency. As part of that process, council did not recommend any funding at the time that the application was received or as part of the 2024 budget adoption. However, shortly after that, as the budget was being adopted, Act 57 was adopted by the South Carolina General Assembly, and that's what created the mechanism to use state and local accommodations taxes for workforce housing purposes. So following that action, staff was requested to develop a memorandum of understanding with the Hilton Head Regional Habitat for Humanity to pursue the development of workforce housing. We brought an initial draft of the memorandum of understanding forward to this body at its December 19th meeting, and at that meeting, we received comments and feedback on the terms of that agreement. Habitat's requested $500,000 to be utilized towards the purchase of land where they would build affordable homes. Habitat hopes to develop somewhere between 8 to 10 residential units, and that was on a 1-acre piece of property. So clearly the intent is to try to get that bang for the buck. To become a family partner, the family must make somewhere between 30 to 80% of the area median income, must go through an intensive application process, attend home ownership classes, and perform at least 300 hours of sweat equity. And at the completion of the build, they purchase the home with a no-interest mortgage, which is a monthly payment at 30% or less of their household income. So again, the priorities that we've talked about of wanting to support workforce housing are included within this document. So Habitat will use the funding it may receive to acquire land and develop the residential units. Habitat will work with staff, and I think that's probably one of the biggest differences between what we've discussed earlier today and what we're discussing now is this is going to be more of a true partnership between the town and Habitat. We're going to use staff that we have both in our community development department. Mr. Quincy White's just recently joined us as our housing lead, and so he's going to play an integral part in helping them with regards to site selection. And then once we've done site selection, design, that could be single family homes, duplexes, quads, whatever makes sense in terms of where the property is located and given its surroundings. but we will work with them hand in glove in performing that process. And so I want to make sure that that's clear, that this is a little bit different in terms of how this is going to go forward as compared to the agreement with the Coastal Community Development Corporation. Again, under the first draft, Habitat will prepare and submit an annual report identifying how the funding is going to be used, and they will, again, work with us jointly to develop a lot of that information. We'll review that and approve it accordingly through our normal review processes. They're going to identify the nature and extent to which the affordable housing unit that seeks to be created will be maintained and the duration of time. Again, they've talked about, because this is a home ownership program, that they sell the units to the property owners. They then manage them during their occupation of those units, but they have the right of first refusal, so that any time while those restrictions are in place, Habitat does have the ability to come back in and retake ownership of those units and ensure that the affordability standards are maintained. We're going to look at then having them provide information to us annually, which would help us to identify and evaluate the effectiveness of that program and how the funding has been used. And then we're going to have the ability, if it were breached, to regain those funds, again, under a contractual basis, not as a priority lien, as a mortgage or anything like that. So at the December 19th meeting, we were requested to add the following items into the memorandum of understanding. So we've added language requiring active employment on Hilton Head Island as a condition of selection for any workforce housing unit created under this memorandum. We inserted indemnification language to protect the town from liability arising under the memorandum. We clarified that the funding is going to be provided on a drawdown basis. So again, we're working with them directly. Site selection, drawdown, design, drawdown. You know, all of those things will kind of work together. And then we revised the applicable AMI ranges so that it matched the existing program requirements that Habitat currently offers, which is 30 to 80% of area median income. So again, the policy questions for you as a body to move this item forward would be, first, to identify the terms within the memorandum of understanding that are before you today. The second would then, to, similar to what we've done with the Coastal Community Development Corporation, understand the timing. If this is going to be funding, is it going to be provided under the current budget, similar to that same time frame that was provided to Coastal Community Development Corporation, or will this be provided as part of the FY25 affiliated agency process? And then lastly, the determination of what value will be included or provided to them as a recommendation of town council. So in the MOU, there is no funding that is stated. That is then included within the affiliated agency application, and there's one pending before you today for discussion as part of an FY24 timeline. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Mr. Gruber?
In your drawdown provisions, you're talking about drawing down as needed. I was thinking that these funds would be used towards purchase of the land, so it'd be needed at the time of closing.
Very well could be. I mean, so we don't have a piece of land yet. We don't know some of those specific details, but it very well could be that that's how it plays out.
I was just trying to clarify that. Then in terms of the 23 or 24 question, since a parcel of land apparently has not been identified, I don't think there's any reason to push this through to the 23 approvals, or that would be my opinion. Thank you.
Okay. James.
Josh, are we restricting it to the use, purchase of land?
No. It could be beyond the purchase of land. So let's say we're able to purchase land for $250,000 and you ultimately recommend and council awards $500,000. That would leave $250,000 that would go towards the design of the units on the parcel and any of the other things that might go towards actually creating those units. So it depends. Or the entire amount could be consumed by the actual acquisition of the land.
You mentioned the role of town would be in site selection and the development of a program for development. Is there anticipated more responsibility or involvement of the town after that?
Yes, we're going to work with them, I think, probably up to and potentially even beyond through our service work in terms of actually developing the unit. So site selection and design is really where we're going to play an active role in working with them to identify where is it going to be located and what's going to go there. A lot of the actual construction of it is handled through the activities of Habitat, but again, the town could be involved in that from a volunteer aspect. So
Beyond the requested 500,000, there is a commitment on staff time going forward.
yes, sir. I very much believe that is our intent.
Thank you. Just, I think for the benefit of the public who's here and public who's watching, how much has the town been involved with Habitat in the past?
Boy.
Ms. Dooley can address that, or somebody.
Great, I can speak. I know I hung a couple of roof trusses last year, so we have been directly involved in a number of things, but I'm not sure beyond that. Other than I know previously there was some land that was provided. I think Ms. Dooley might be able to explain that better.
Please come up.
Yeah, the Glen was provided by the town, the land, yeah.
Yes, so that property over just off of Marshland was provided by the town to us. We then provided all the infrastructure and then did the fundraising for each house as we built it. As Josh mentioned, I know Mark can say he was on the floor painting houses too. So they have come out several times and volunteered with us. Council came out a couple of times and volunteered with us as
How
well.
many acres was that?
The 14,
14.
divided into 2 phases.
So in today's prices, 14 acres would be a fairly substantial number. We're talking land values somewhere between $250,000 and $500,000 today. So our expectation is we might get an acre or two. That contrasts pretty dramatically from the 14. So, okay, I've got an order of magnitude of what we're dealing with. Thank you. Those are my questions, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Stalford, nothing? Okay. Before we move forward with a motion, I'm going to open it up for public comment. Any public comment on this particular, yes, sir?
Good afternoon again. Good to see y'all. My name's Jeb Bush. I'm the Development Director for Habitat for Humanity. It's nice to speak in front of you again. And just a little FYI on me. My family is actually, somebody in my family has lived here since 1951, whether maternal or paternal side. So, as I said last time, we have many donors who are interested in donating to the building of houses on Hilton Head. We just need the land. I write about 15 to 20 grants per year. A key question on most applications is, will the money for this grant be leveraged to raise more money? I hope you're also asking that question of us, because the answer is an astounding yes. I can pretty much guarantee you that once we find once we get the land, we will find the funds directly to build houses. People love to sponsor these homes. To build a house, it costs us a little more than $100,000. That's what we're building right now. That amount is what our home buyers, or our family partners, as we like to call them, will purchase the house for. We then develop a mortgage that is appropriate for them and that is affordable. And for many families, with escrow included, we're just looking at a little over $500 a month, staying well below their 30% of their income. No one can develop a home that inexpensively besides Habitat. The families we serve, as Brenda talked about, are working class families. They're going to invest their time and energy into making Hilton Head Island a better place to live. The reason people invest in our program is that they know they are making a difference in the lives of families who call this area home. A home is something tangible people can see, something they can drive by and say, and as they drive by, they say, I helped build that. Our donors want to drive by and see that as well. Gentlemen, I encourage you to vote yes on this as well as the funding, and so that you can then drive by the homes built there and say to yourself, I helped build that house for that family. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Ms. Lee. I've got Ms. Lee before you. I'm sorry, I called her first. who can be after her. Come on, Ms. Lee.
Thanks, Chairman. I'm puzzled, actually, by your vote on the CCDC MOU because you left out two important items that's still not very clear to me. Number one, as Ms. Gruber mentioned, what is the definition of the AMI? Right now, you have two definitions. One is the Beaufort County income limits, which is a table set out by HUD. Another definition is the area median income. It's also set out by HUD, but it's a completely different concept. So which AMI I'm talking about, or you're talking about? So I'm surprised that Mr. Gruber didn't mention that and say that should be something in the amendment. The second important item is the income distribution. In your language, you say no less than 30%, no more than 120%. And Mr. Wu explained to you, their allocation out of the 13 model or 13 properties, 3 units will be 120%. 4 units will be at 50%. And then 6 units will be at 80%. So where is the 30% MI? So why even bother to write in your MOU if the distribution has nothing to do with the 30% AMI? So that's why I don't understand what you just approved. And that's why I want to make a statement about that. The second thing is I was a little bit offended by the earlier comment that people in this room are not negatively impacted by the housing crisis. None of us, or at least me, I was not born with a silver spoon in my mouth. I came from China, as you know. I commuted every day 2 hours to New York City for a long time after I finished graduate school. So don't tell me that I'm not suffering from this because now I rely on my retirement income. People here in this room are negatively impacted because we have to pay higher property taxes, insurance taxes, we pay higher grocery payment as well as healthcare, just because Hilton Head is expensive. We also have to pay $450 million of school bond. And then just months ago, the county council asked to approve a 15-year penny taxes on for infrastructure projects. So before you dole out our money, please think what it means to people who are paying taxes and our money is spread too thin, especially on Habitat for Humanity. There are 7 properties over the last 2 years that were sold for $275,000. Those houses are the ones that we paid to fund their investments. My friend just bought a house in Marshside that he paid $250,000 with 0 government subsidies. So where is the fairness and equity? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Lee.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name's Tom DeMette. I've been in the commercial real estate business for 40 years, and I've been a permanent resident of Hilton Head Island for 25 years. It's been my privilege to be on the Habitat Board the last 3 years and to see the pride and sense of community that comes with home ownership. I'd like to ask your support of the MOU, and I think we'd be good partners with Hilton Head Island for 2 basic reasons. One is essentially the economic issue. And with our business model, we can put someone in a brand new home for principal and interest, tax and insurance, somewhere between $500 and $600 a month. That's from my experience, that's roughly half of what you can rent for. And you have the pride of ownership along that way. And the other is, I think home ownership generally promotes a more stable and permanent workforce. And for those reasons, I ask your support. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Got you next, Ms. Garner. The gentleman in the back was for you.
Thank you for indulging me again, gentlemen. Charles Callahan, Wexford. Just wanted a couple of things that I'd like to bring to everybody's attention, maybe questions or thoughts that maybe you might want to look into. I get very uncomfortable with non-governmental organizations getting involved with government. And in my career, having been involved with both commercial endeavors, certainly many charities, I I get very concerned when I see these monies start being mixed. There gets to be a lot of mission creep. And a lot of people that maybe seem to be very altruistic when they're giving to various things like 501(c)(3)s, are really doing this for a tax break, and trying to make themselves feel a little bit better. And a lot of times that doesn't work out really well. And then the focus of whatever charitable organization has long since lost sight of what it was trying to accomplish. That's one concern I have. Second is, I've heard a number of things here about these 13 locations. You know, who decided what these 13 jobs or whatever these folks might be doing, are they going to be that impactful that something that requires this massive logistical train? Because I hear a lot of conversation, a lot of entities, a lot of everything from, repairs to maintenance to deciding who's in here and who isn't. This is a massive endeavor for, are we getting the impact that we really think we're going to get? And I'm kind of getting that feeling that we are not going to. So again, it makes me very uncomfortable. And just on a personal note, I'll address something we said here earlier. I do know what it's like to go home without, have no heat on in your house. I do know what it's like to make choices about whether you eat or whether you rent a movie. I've been there. I'm not there now because I work very, very hard not to be. I'd even go as far to say as, I mentioned immigration. I had family members who grew up with farm animals in the house to keep warm. So I know what it's like. So when I see something like this, it really, really sets me back and makes me concerned about where this money goes and what it's being done. And it may feel good, but it's not accomplishing what you think it's going to accomplish. Again, I go back to a private sector solution. What jobs are we trying to fill here? And how could we get those people here? And certainly there is an issue here with getting people to work. But how can we do that in an economical fashion that makes sense? To me, this does not make sense. Again, thank you for indulging my comments.
Thank you. Yes.
Melinda Tenor, Palmetto Hall. I think I got cut out of the affiliated agency approval for 2024. It seems like you moved quickly through that, so I didn't get a chance to say my comments regarding that. And I know the CCDC is looking for funding through the affiliated agent program. The comments are, I imagine that when the affiliated agency program was designed, there was a lot of thought put into the application process. And the application has a financial statement requirement asking for the organization's budget, the current and previous 2 years profit and loss report and balance sheet. No financial statements were provided in the package that was included in the pre-read online, and CCDC does not have 2 years of financial results. So I was asking for you to not approve the CCDC for the affiliated agency model at this time, because they are not a proven model and do not have the 2 years of financial results. In addition, the last time we talked, there was a question about, is there enough funding available for the CCDC and Habitat for Humanity? There is an exhibit in the package that lays out the availability of the state aid tax funds, and I just wanted to share some observations about the exhibit. The calculation shows that the $1.2 million max of aid tax dollars that can be used for affordable housing can fit within the available monies, leaving a balance of $795,000. Just wanted to make the point that that's because of the $1.1 million carryover from the prior year. The current ATAX funding wouldn't cover the entire cost, and the funding carryover is used to fill that gap. And I think it's important as you think about the sustainability for all of the affiliated agency programs in the future. In addition, the current fiscal year state aid tax is running lower than last year. July through September is 3.6% lower, and October through December, which is an estimate from your finance area, is 11.1% lower. And if that trend continues, there will be less money available through ATAX in the future. Thank you for the opportunity to provide my feedback.
Thank you. Any additional comments on the Habitat MOU? Yes.
Before you put me on the clock, if you guys would like to stand up, I mean, I've been sitting for 2 hours, I got fanny fatigue. I don't know if you guys have that or not, but if you'd like to stand while I talk, I'm fine.
Come on up, Mr. Kill, you are standing
You've been here
now.
longer than that.
Good afternoon. My name is Paul Kale. I moved my family here in 1991 for a job opportunity. And in 2015, I sold my business. And my wife and I said, hey, this is a pretty good place to retire to. So we're still here. My involvement with Habitat for Humanity started with First Presbyterian Church. The church has built 5 homes over the years. And my involvement was more with the last 2 homes. I'd like to tell you a little bit about the inhabitants of those homes. I was going to tell you a lot about Ayak Constellados. He is here, and he's going to talk, so I'm going to skip him over, except he is a great, he is paying back to his community in a lot of ways. One is he's serving on the Housing Action Committee, and that's great to see a Habitat person volunteer to do that. House number 2 that I was involved in was a home for Carolina Ramirez and her 3 children. Years before she got a Habitat house, my wife started tutoring Carolina's oldest child, who is a 3rd grader at Hilton Head Elementary School, Tanya. My wife continued tutoring her through senior high school. Her senior in high school, her family got a Habitat house. For the first time in her life, she had a bedroom of her own. She didn't have to sleep with her mother or her grandmother. Also that year, she received scholarships. She got the Rotary Scholarship to attend USCB in a nursing program. On her application for that Rotary Scholarship, she said, I want to become a nurse and work with the geriatric community on Hilton Head Island. This April, she will graduate from USCB with honors and will be a nurse. The other children in that family, one is working in food and beverage now after graduating from Hilton Head High School. The other one is in Hilton Head High School and wants to go to a vocational program for electrician. The final thing I want to say is a bittersweet one. Last year, Habitat created a partnership with Farino Developers to construct 10 townhomes in Hardyville. Well over 100 families applied for that. You've been notified about that. I had the privilege of interviewing 7 of them, the ones here in Hilton Head that applied. And those families will get one of those homes. The sad part about it, one is a bookkeeper, one has worked at Kroger for 14 years, one works in a pharmacy at CVS and attends nursing school at community college. One is an assistant manager at an auto parts store, one works for a pool cleaning company, and one is a hairstylist. When they move to Hardyville, they may not come back to Hilton Head to work, and we're going to lose some initial members of workforce housing. As long as we delay providing this housing, our workforce members are going to decline. We thank you for your consideration.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Alex Castellanos, and thank you for the opportunity to speak before you today. I just come here before you so you guys can see, put a face to the product that Habitat delivers. Obviously, as Mr. Paul Kill says, I am one of the residents at the 14 acres that you guys mentioned. I have the blessing of living in the Glen. And when we were building our houses through volunteering, I was just like, it's just such an impression seeing all these people come together, building these homes. As Josh said, the town has come over. You have churches come over. And that's what Habitat provides. It gives everybody an opportunity to make a change in the world. And you know what? I couldn't forget where I come from. I come from a dream where my dream as a boy was to own a bike, and now I have a house. So I cannot forget where I come from all the time. It pushes me to move forward. And that is the reason why I joined the Affordable Housing Committee, because I was like, you know what? I cannot stand on the sidelines. I got to be a part of the change that moves forward. And I put that every day into my kids' life. I tell them every day, you're going to get an opportunity and you got to be the change that you want to see in your community. So it's not just a house. I know we talked a lot about numbers, but it's the impact. It's the everlasting impact that you make on a generation. Now, the one that comes after us, and it continues a cycle. So I would just ask you guys to consider the MOU with Habitat. It's time. It's been a long time coming. We've been talking about it. I know, like I said, we built the Glen out, but it's time, and it's due, and it's needed. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Oops. Angie Hutchins, Shipyard. I'm thrilled that you're considering Habitat for funding, and I wanted to stand up and be able to say that Habitat has nearly a 50-year track record of helping, according to their website, more than 59 million people around the world. They have a proven track record of more than a few months of minimizing side effects in meaning that they've considered all the options of ways to help people, and they've been able to vet out all the questions and issues that we've partially discussed in looking at other options for workforce. Fraud, especially within government, is rampant. At the federal level, there's estimates of $12 billion being taken out of fraudulently spent from taxpayer money. And I don't know what local would be, but I know from personal experience, fraud is a real issue that when people have concerns about how money is being spent, it doesn't mean they don't care. It doesn't mean they haven't been there. It doesn't mean anything except for let's spend our money well and let's think about all the possible consequences that we can in order to minimize them. The other significant difference in this between this and the CCDC proposal is the 99-year restriction. As a realtor, I've looked up some of the resales that have happened with Habitat houses on the road. And while you want somebody to have their dream house for as long as they can have it, the goal of home ownership is very real to me. And I think it's one of the best ways to build families, build wealth, build community, build so many things. A person that receives a Habitat home after much work and sweat and volunteer hours is also able to sell that property, not at minimizing the values of a neighborhood or anything else, but they can continue to build their legacy and their lives. And I think that's a huge important difference as we are calling all hands on deck to solve workforce housing. The last thing I want to mention is that we have a national problem of inflation, which has totally exacerbated our workforce issue. Workforce is a big problem. I get it. I'm not minimizing that as one person stood up and really sloshed. I would encourage you guys to help us not slosh judgments on other people in our community, because our community is best when we build each other up. But anyway, there's so many aspects to why this one is so great, and the other one should give all of us pause to consider carefully the consequences. The other one may make a short-term solution with lots of long-term issues, as was so well stated by people who've been in practice of these sorts of areas. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Lynn Pico Bullard, Hilton Head Plantation. What I see here is two separate entities. We have Habitat for Humanity, which is longstanding, proven, and successful, and doesn't require money from the town. CCDC is experimental, unknown, 99-year rental term. So, if you decide on CCDC that it's a noble cause because we need to do something, I would suggest you have the attorney put in an escape clause in case this all blows up in your face. As far as Habitat for Humanity, I'm all for it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, we'll bring it back to the dais. I'm sure we have more for you, Mr. Gruber, Mr. Ames. I see you ready.
I have two questions that I might want to address to Ms. Dooley again. The first is, has a town employee ever applied for a Habitat house on Hilton Head, and has a Habitat house ever been occupied by a town employee?
Ms. Dooley, please approach so we can capture your answers for the record.
Well, I think my answer is I don't know for sure. Somebody else? Not that I'm aware of. I've been with this organization 5 or 6 years, and that time I can't think of a family that was a town.
Well, I hope
there's the opportunity for the town employees to make an
Absolutely.
application and participate in your good program.
Of
The
course.
second question is, I'm a little confused because of some statements that have been made. Are all the houses in the Glen still occupied by people who qualify in that 30 to 80% AMI?
Once we select our families into the program, we don't track that information. We hope they're doing better, quite honestly.
And so when a house is sold, they pay back the second mortgage, but they take pocket, whatever you want to say, anything above that.
So yeah, the longer they're in the home, the more there would be that opportunity. That second mortgage is prorated over time, so it goes down the longer they're in the home.
So all the homes in the Glen at this time might not be occupied by people earning that 32. Okay, I just wanted to clarify that for my own information.
Okay?
Okay. Any additional questions, comments for Mr. Gruber from the dais? Okay, so we are dealing with the MOU only at this point. So I would entertain a motion in that fashion.
Make a motion that the Finance Administration Committee forward a resolution to the full council authorizing a memorandum of understanding with Habitat of Humanity to support workforce housing.
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor? Okay, thank you. Good, Kim. All right, now we will move on to the question of the timeline. I would just remind us that Habitat did apply for funding during our last budget cycle. We, at that time, said that we needed to have an MOU in place. So if you look at the timeline there, it's almost a year's time since that discussion had happened. I just want us to consider that when we have the timelines in front of us as far as the 23 cycle and the 24 cycle.
I have no objection to the accelerated cycle. It just seems to me, since no property has been identified, there's not a real compelling reason to do that. But I certainly support working with Habitat for Humanity in this.
There's no compelling situation. There's no drawdown.
Correct.
Unless there's a staff issue, I would say let's work on the accelerated basis.
Is that a motion?
I'm be in favor of Mr.
That could be a motion.
That's a motion? Is that a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion on it? All in favor? Thank you. All right, now we will take a break. You might get tapped. Councilman Alfred on the shoulder. Okay. We are moving right along to our new business at hand. Consideration of a fiscal year 2024 affiliated agency funding application by the Coastal Community Development Corporation. Mr. Gruber.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. In your packet, and again, as we've discussed previously today, one of the elements for consideration by this body is a request for specific funding amount associated with this existing fiscal year. So an FY24 funding request for the development of workforce housing. And so as far as the Coastal Community Development Corporation, what they've submitted is a request for $600,000 in funding as part of a total project budget of $3 million. And they've outlined in here from both narrative and some other information how that funding will come together and how it will be used. I know a question was raised about the financial statements. Mr. Wolf is working with their CPA to have those prepared. He's indicated that they'll have financial statements as of the end of November 2023 to us by the end of next week. They're still being prepared. I will tell you that most of the time we do not publish this information publicly. We don't release those financial informations. What we use it for is to help verify that the information that's provided in this application matches to the financial statements that they've provided to us. So, and then when we get ready to talk about Habitat for Humanity, we do have their financial statements that were submitted as part of their original FY24 application. So, having said that, you have in front of you this request. The purpose of the request is outlined in the application, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have regarding it.
Okay. Stanford. Okay. Mr. Alfred.
Have it on there?
He's questioned out.
I'm done.
Oh, you're,
Names.
why does this say 50 to 120? It's supposed to be 30 to 120?
Well, what I would say is their original application, that's what the request was, but the committee asked that it be amended to 30 to 120% of AMI.
Answering the question.
Yep.
Well, I'll make an opening statement just to get some reaction from the rest of the committee. In my experience in dealing with startups, a mistake to tear down the request to the point that it can't survive. So I'm looking at the request at 600,000 as a starting point, and then wondering if there is some rational way of determining that it ought to be a lesser amount. I don't have those that criteria in my head at this point, so I would be inclined to go ahead with a full request.
It's going to be done on a takedown basis anyway. And so I think that deals with a lot of the issues.
Any thoughts, Mr. Alfred?
So you're basically, sounds to me like you gentlemen are suggesting 600. Unless you or the chairman. Yeah, I mean, we could bring it down to another figure.
It doesn't meet the goal.
You're investing in the concept. Where you guys are, which is 600.
Okay.
You happy?
I'm good with the pleasure of the committee. I'll hold on the motion. I want to hear from the public before we move on this. Anyone want to speak on this particular topic?
Already did.
Yes. Okay. Seeing none, we will bring it back to the dais.
I'd be happy to move that the
fiscal year 2024 affiliated agency funding application by the Coastal Community Development Corporation be forwarded for the full council's consideration.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? All in favor? All right, next item, consideration of a fiscal year 2024 affiliated agency funding application by the Hilton Head Regional Habitat for Humanity.
I think there's strong support for this application and the general program. We've heard considerations of efficiency, et cetera. So I would support full funding at the $500,000.
Second.
Okay. Anyone from the public want to speak to this particular item?
That wasn't really a motion.
Well, you got a second.
All right. You're all set. Okay, good.
Public comment?
Just wanted to say, we look forward to leveraging these funds.
Thank you. Thank you. Further discussion amongst committee members? All in favor? Okay, that brings us to the last agenda item, which is adjournment. Thank you for your patience. Good job, everyone, and thank you, public, for being so attentive and patient with us.
You did it in an hour and